Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. This is the instant Romeo sees Juliet, a moment so profound it reshapes their lives irrevocably. But is this passionate, instantaneous connection the root of their undoing, or a pure love tragically stifled by a world unwilling to change?
Welcome to Ink and Argument Podcast. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Thomas. Today, we're delving into one of the most iconic and enduring tragedies in literature, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It's a story of feuding families, forbidden love, and fatal consequences. Published initially in 1597. We'll explore whether their demise was an inevitable outcome of their circumstances or the product of a series of flawed decisions. And as we go through the story, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. If you're interested in being our next guest on Ink and Argument, send us a message on Instagram at Ink and Argument.
We often frame Romeo and Juliet as the epitome of true love, yet their story begins in a Verona consumed by an ancient, bitter feud between the Montagues and the Capulets. The play opens not with a tender moment, but with a street brawl, highlighting the constant tension. Samson and Gregory, Capulet's servants, provoke Abraham and Balthazar, Montague's men, escalating into violence. This is the ancient grudge breaking into new mutiny mentioned in the prologue.
That's right, Rachel. It's a visceral introduction to the world they inhabit. Benvolio, Romeo's cousin and a peacemaker, tries to break it up, saying, quote, "Part, fools. Put up your swords, you know not what you do," end quote. But then Tybalt, Juliet's hot-headed cousin, enters and immediately seeks to fight Benvolio, declaring, quote, "I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee," end quote. This sets the stage for the deep-seated hatred that defines Verona.
And this continuous public disorder forces Prince Aeschylus to intervene. He's furious, imposing a decree that any further disturbance will result in death for the heads of the houses. This isn't just a casual warning, it's a direct threat from the highest authority, establishing the high stakes right from the start. The prince clearly states, "If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace."
The prince's decree is a critical piece of the puzzle. It underscores that the feud isn't just a private matter, it affects the entire city. After the brawl, we see Romeo moping over Rosalind, who has sworn off love. He's presented as a lovesick young man using extravagant language to describe his unrequited affection, like, quote, "Love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged, a fire sparkling in lovers' eyes," end quote. It suggests a certain immaturity in his understanding of love, as he lives in a state of heavy lightness, serious vanity.
It certainly does. His friends Benvolio and Mercutio seem to find his dramatic sighs rather tiresome. Benvolio, ever practical, urges Romeo to examine other beauties, implying that his love for Rosalind is more performance than a genuine deep emotion. This leads to Benvolio suggesting he should forget to think of her by looking at others. It makes you wonder if Romeo is simply in love with the idea of being in love.
I think that's fair. This early portrayal of Romeo as melancholic and somewhat detached sets a precedent for his impulsive nature. Meanwhile, Lord Capulet is discussing a potential marriage for Juliet with County Paris. Capulet initially resists, saying, quote, "My child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years," end quote. He insists that Paris should woo her, and her consent is paramount. This seems surprisingly progressive for the time, stating his will to her consent is but a part.
It does, and it highlights a tension. Capulet wants the best for his daughter, but also the most advantageous match. He holds a feast, telling Paris to look upon all the ladies and compare Juliet to them. It's at this feast that Romeo, persuaded by Benvolio to forget Rosaline, though he claims no sight can compare to Rosaline, encounters Juliet. The moment he sees her, his world shifts entirely. All his previous declarations of love for Rosaline vanish.
This is where the idea of love at first sight truly takes hold in the play. Romeo's description of Juliet is rapturous. Quote, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright," end quote. Their first interaction is a sonnet, a perfect poem, signifying the immediate and profound connection they feel. They share a kiss, and it's electrifying for both of them.
But the joy is quickly overshadowed by the discovery of their identities. Romeo realizes he's fallen for a Capulet, and Juliet discovers her love is a Montague. Juliet's words, quote, "My only love sprung from my only hate, too early seen unknown and known too late. Prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy," end quote, perfectly encapsulate the tragic irony. It's the instant recognition that their love is rooted in their family's enmity.
Their initial encounter at the feast and the immediate declaration of love feels like a whirlwind. But let's not forget Mercutio's Queen Mab speech delivered just before they enter the feast. It's a fantastical, almost feverish monologue about dreams and desires. It injects a sense of wild, uncontrollable fantasy into the story, almost foreshadowing the unrealistic speed and intensity of Romeo's new love. Mercutio calls dreams the children of an idle brain, begot of nothing but vain fantasy.
Speaking of intensity, it's worth taking a moment to mention that if you're enjoying our deep dive into these classic texts, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our podcast. Your support helps us bring more of these conversations to you. And if you'd like to join us as a guest on Ink and Argument, you can send us a message on Instagram at Ink and Argument. We'd love to hear from you.
After the feast, we move to the famous balconies scene. Romeo, unable to leave, scales the Capulet orchard wall. He overhears Juliet speaking her thoughts aloud, lamenting his family name. Quote, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name." End quote. It's a powerful moment, as she essentially offers to give up everything for him even before she knows he's listening.
And Romeo responds, making his presence known, leading to their impassioned exchange of vows. Juliet's caution here is striking. She worries about the rashness of their promises, comparing their sudden love to lightning. Quote, "It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning which doth cease to be ere one can say, it lightens." End quote. She's aware of the dangers of such quick, intense emotion, pleading with him not to swear by the moon because it is inconstant.
Yet, despite her reservations, she quickly agrees to marry him. They decide to marry the very next day. Romeo rushes to Friar Lawrence, who is initially shocked by Romeo's sudden shift from Rosalind to Juliet. The friar observes, quote, "Young men's love then lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes." End quote. This highlights the friar's perception of Romeo's immaturity, noting how quickly he moved on from Rosalind.
He's clearly skeptical, yet he agrees to marry them, believing it might, quote, "turn your household's rancor to pure love," end quote. This decision, however well-intentioned, is a significant turning point. It's an act of deception against their families and the prince's decree, and it immediately puts him in a compromised position. The friar warns Romeo to love moderately. Long love doth so. Too swift arrives as tardy as too slow.
Absolutely. The secret marriage introduces a layer of complexity and risk that amplifies all subsequent events. The nurse acts as their go-between, confirming the arrangements, and we see Juliet's eagerness, impatient for the news. The marriage takes place quickly and secretly, marking the apex of their joy, but also the start of their deeper entanglement. The nurse even procures the cords made like a tackled stair for Romeo's secret entry later.
The joy is short-lived. Act 3 plunges us back into the simmering feud. Mercutio, Benvolio, and Romeo encounter Tybalt. Tybalt, still furious about Romeo crashing the Capulet feast, challenges him. Romeo, now secretly married to Juliet, sees Tybalt as family and tries to de-escalate, saying, quote, "Tybalt, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. Villain am I none." End quote. Romeo is trying to show respect for Tybalt as his new kinsman.
Romeo's peace overture is tragically misunderstood. Mercurio, disgusted by what he perceives as Romeo's cowardly submission, steps in to fight Tybalt. It's a fierce duel as Romeo attempts to intervene and separate them. Tybalt stabs Mercurio under Romeo's arm. Mercurio's dying words, quote, a plague of both your houses, end quote, curse both families and foreshadow the devastation to come.
Mercurio's death transforms Romeo. Overwhelmed with grief and guilt, he abandons his earlier restraint and seeks revenge. He challenges Tybalt and kills him. This impulsive act seals Romeo's fate. He's no longer just a lovesick youth. He's a murderer, banished by the prince, a sentence that to him is worse than death. Quote, "Ha, banishment? Be merciful, say death. For exile hath more terror in his look, much more than death. Do not say banishment."
This is the true escalation of the tragedy. Romeo's banishment directly impacts Juliet, who is torn between loyalty to her family and love for her husband. She experiences a profound internal conflict, initially cursing Romeo as a, quote, serpent heart hid with a flowering face, end quote, but quickly reaffirming her love. The friar counsels Romeo to go to Mantua after a final night with Juliet, while he works to reveal their marriage and reconcile the families. Meanwhile, Lady Capulet, unaware of the marriage, vows revenge on Romeo, stating she will find someone in Mantua to give him a, quote, dram of poison, end quote.
But the Capulets, unaware of Juliet's secret marriage, decide to push forward her wedding to Paris to cheer her up after Tybalt's death. This forces Juliet into an impossible corner. Her father, Lord Capulet, reacts with explosive rage when she refuses, threatening to disown her. Quote, "Hang thee, young baggage, disobedient wretch, I tell thee what, get thee to church o' Thursday, or never after look me in the face," end quote. He even says, "Out, you green sickness carrion, out, you baggage."
This pressure from her father drives Juliet to desperation. She turns to the friar for a solution, even threatening suicide. The friar devises a plan for her to take a sleeping potion that will make her appear dead for 42 hours, allowing her to escape the marriage to Paris and eventually reunite with Romeo in Mantua. It's a highly dangerous plan, relying on precise timing and communication, and he stresses she must be strong enough to follow through.
It requires meticulous execution, which in a tragedy is almost guaranteed to go awry. And again, before we delve into the play's heartbreaking conclusion, a quick reminder to please like this episode and subscribe to Ink and Argument podcast. If you're passionate about literature and have a unique perspective to share, reach out to us on Instagram at Ink and Argument. We're always looking for engaging guests.
Juliet, after a moment of intense fear and doubt about the potion's efficacy and the horror of waking in the tomb, fearing she might wake before Romeo comes, drinks it, saying, quote, "Romeo, I come, this do I drink to thee," end quote. The next morning she is discovered by the nurse, seemingly dead. The Capulets, along with Paris, are devastated. The friar orchestrates her funeral, and she is laid in the family vault.
The fatal flaw in the plan surfaces quickly. Friar John, tasked with delivering the letter explaining the ruse to Romeo, is quarantined due to plague fears and never reaches Mantua. This means Romeo receives news of Juliet's actual death from Balthazar, his servant, leading him to believe she is truly gone. Balthazar tells Romeo his lady sleeps in Capulet's monument.
Romeo, hearing this, defies the stars and immediately decides to join Juliet in death. He goes to an apothecary, coercing him to sell a deadly poison. Quote, "O mischief, thou art swift to enter in the thoughts of desperate men," end quote, he proclaims, fully committing to his tragic course of action. He pays the apothecary 40 ducats, saying, "I sell thee poison. Thou hast sold me none."
He arrives at the Capulet vault, where he encounters Paris, who is mourning Juliet. Paris recognizes Romeo, blaming him for Tybalt's death and Juliet's grief, and challenges him. Romeo tries to avoid a fight, saying, "Tempt not a desperate man," but Paris insists and Romeo kills him. It's another senseless death, fueled by the same feud that has already claimed Mercutio and Tybalt. Romeo then respectfully lays Paris in the tomb next to Juliet.
Then Romeo enters the vault, sees Juliet, and is struck by her beauty, still undiminished. Unaware of the potion, he drinks the poison, uttering his final words, quote, "Thus, with a kiss, I die," end quote. Shortly after, the friar arrives and Juliet awakens to find Romeo dead beside her. She finds the empty vial and kisses his lips, hoping for a restorative drop of poison.
Her despair is absolute. When the friar urges her to leave, she refuses. Finding Romeo's dagger, she uses it to take her own life, choosing to die with him rather than live without him. Quote, "O happy dagger, this is thy sheath, there rust and let me die," end quote. The watchmen arrive, discovering the gruesome scene, and the prince, Capulets, and Montague are summoned. Lady Montague is also found dead, having died from grief over Romeo's exile.
The friar recounts the entire story, from the secret marriage to the potion. Balthasar corroborates Romeo's intent, and Paris's page confirms his master's presence. Finally, Romeo's letter to his father, found by the prince, confirms the friar's account. It's a moment of terrible clarity for everyone involved, revealing how Friar John's quarantine ruined everything.
So, Rachel, given all these events, was the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet truly an inevitable consequence of fate, or could better choices have averted their deaths?
I think while fate, or perhaps the star-crossed element, sets the initial stage, the prologue calls them star-crossed lovers, it's a series of disastrous choices by almost every character that truly leads to their end. Romeo's impulsivity, his quick shift from Rosaline, and his immediate decision to take revenge on Tybalt are crucial. Juliet, while showing more agency, still makes a desperate choice to trust the friar's incredibly risky plan, rather than seeking more immediate, transparent solutions. The adults, particularly the friar and Lord Capulet, also play a huge role. The friar with his well-meaning but ill-conceived plan, and Capulet, whose tyrannical demand for Juliet to marry Paris, pushes her to the brink. It feels less like an unchangeable destiny and more like a cascading failure of judgment and communication.
I agree with much of that, Rachel, particularly about the choices and the miscommunications. However, I lean more towards the idea that the ancient grudge, the feud itself, was the inescapable force. From the moment Romeo and Juliet were born into opposing houses, their love was an act of defiance that could only lead to catastrophe. The individual's choices, while certainly contributing, were often made under extreme pressure, amplified by the societal expectation of loyalty to family over individual happiness. Mercutio's dying curse, a plague of both your houses, is perhaps the most prescient line in the play. It suggests that the destructive power of their family's hatred was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their love, however pure, was never destined to thrive in such a toxic environment. It's a commentary on how external forces, particularly ingrained social conflict, can crush even the most tender of human connections. Their tragic end, for me, serves as a stark warning about the futility and devastating cost of unresolved generational animosity.
Thank you for joining us on Ink and Argument podcast for this discussion of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. You can find more of his works and information about the publication by Standard eBooks at standardebooks.org. Make sure to tune in every Saturday and Wednesday at 12 a.m. London time for new episodes. Remember that translations are available in Norwegian, French, and German.
If you've been moved by our conversation today, share this episode with someone who enjoys a good story and a lively debate. Goodbye for now.